In 1975, a small American company owed a payment of $1 million, and it was 75,000 short. So the founder did something desperate. He swept every last dollar out of every store and account the company had. The workers' checks bounced. The bank was so alarmed that it dropped the company entirely. No account, no way to pay anyone. And here is the strange part. This company was selling every single thing it made, growing faster every year, and it was still hours from dead. A few years later, it would become one of the most recognized brands on earth. There is a good chance you are wearing its logo right now. This is the story of Nike, told by the man who built it, Phil Knight, in his memoir Shoe Dog. His claim is not the clean success story you expect. Building something great, he says, is a messy, cash-starved brawl that he barely survived, chasing one thing he calls his crazy idea. No master plan, just a calling and a refusal to quit. And near the end, one thing he would go back and tell his younger self, the thing he almost missed while fighting to stay alive. So where does a global brand begin? Not with a business plan. It begins with a 24-year-old who is not sure what to do with his life. Knight felt the dread of settling into an ordinary career, but he had one strange, stubborn thought. He loved running and he loved shoes. In college, he had written his thesis arguing that cheap, high-quality Japanese running shoes could beat the giants of the industry. Everyone treated it as a school assignment. Knight treated it as a calling. He calls it his crazy idea, and he says the same thing to anyone who will listen. Do not chase money or status or the approval of other people. Chase a calling. Find the thing that pulls at you even when it makes no sense. And follow it, because that is the only fuel strong enough to carry you through the years of pain that building anything great will cost you. In practice, this is the professional who feels the tug of something they cannot quite justify on a spreadsheet and decides to take it seriously instead of burying it under a safe job. The crazy idea is not a plan yet. It is just a direction worth betting a life on. But a direction is worthless until you actually move. At 24, Knight flew to Japan to chase his crazy idea with almost nothing but nerve. He talked his way into a meeting with a Japanese shoe company called Onitsuka, whose shoes he admired. He pitched himself as their man in America and told them boldly that together they could overtake Adidas, the biggest name in the world. It worked. Impressed, they asked the obvious question, "What is the name of your company?" Knight did not have a company, so he blurted out the first thing he could think of, Blue Ribbon, after the track ribbons that had hung on his childhood wall. Nike, in that moment, was a young man promising a business that did not exist. That is the lesson. He did not wait until he felt ready, or qualified, or safe. He started and figured it out on the way. If this breakdown is worth your time, subscribe. There is a new book decoded here every week. Because starting is exhilarating, right up until the first shipment arrives and someone has to pay for it. Here is the part of the story nobody tells you. Blue Ribbon was a hit almost immediately. Knight sold Onitsuka shoes out of the trunk of his car at track meets, and runners bought everything he had. Sales doubled year after year, and Knight was constantly, desperately broke. The reason is a trap that kills more good companies than bad ideas ever do. Every dollar that came in from selling shoes went straight back out to order the next, bigger shipment. Growth did not fill his bank account, it emptied it. The faster he grew, the more cash he needed, and the closer he lived to the edge. Banks in the 1960s hated lending to an unproven business, so every late shipment and every loan repayment became a fresh crisis. This is the quiet killer of ambition, cash flow, and it is why a company selling everything it makes can still go under. In practice, a freelancer or a founder can watch their revenue climb, feel successful, and still fail to make payroll because profit on paper is not money in the bank. Knight learned it the hard way, again and again, and the only thing that carried him through it was not money, it was people. Knight was convinced he could not build this alone, and he was right. He surrounded himself with people who believed in the crazy idea as fiercely as he did. His old track coach, Bill Bowerman, a legend in the sport, became his partner on a handshake, 51% to Knight, 49% to him. His first employee, Jeff Johnson, was so obsessed with running and selling shoes that after a car crash fractured his skull, he kept selling. Then came Bob Woodall, paralyzed from the waist down, who ran a store and later the operations and never once used his situation as an excuse. Knight called this scruffy, brilliant group the Butt Faces, and they built Nike together. But here is what made it work. Knight refused to manage them. He gave a person a job and then got out of the way, trusting them to surprise him, and they almost always did. In practice, this is the manager who stops hiring for a polished resume and starts hiring for obsession, then resists the urge to hover because the right people, pointed at a shared purpose, do their best work when they are trusted. A team like that is priceless. Which is exactly why the biggest threat to Nike came from the one relationship Knight did not control. For years, Blue Ribbon depended entirely on Onitsuka. Every shoe they sold came from that one supplier on the other side of the world, and slowly that dependence became a noose. The shipments arrived late, and often wrong, the wrong sizes, the wrong styles, the leftovers. Then Knight discovered the truth. Onitsuka was quietly shopping for a new American distributor to replace him. He had built a thriving business on a foundation he did not own, and it was about to be pulled out from under him. So Knight did the only thing he could. He built a secret backup. A new brand, from new factories, with a name his employee Johnson said came to him in a dream. Nike, after the Greek goddess of victory. A young art student designed the swoosh for $35. When Onitsuka found out and cut ties, it became a brutal courtroom fight, which Blue Ribbon somehow won. The lesson is permanent. Never let a single partner, client, or supplier hold your entire fate in their hands. Build the backup before you need it, because the moment all your leverage sits with someone else, you do not have a business, you have a hostage. Survival, though, was only ever half the game. The other half was building something people wanted to belong to. Nike did not win on cash or contracts. It won on two things: better products and a bigger story. On the product side, Bowerman was relentless. One morning he stared at his wife waffle iron, poured rubber into it, and created a gridded sole that gripped like nothing before it. The waffle sole made Nike shoes so distinctive that people wore them off the track, and a running shoe became a lifestyle. On the story side, Knight built an identity that people wanted to join. Nike was not selling rubber and fabric. It was selling athletes, innovation, and one idea above all, winning. When customers laced up Nike shoes, they were buying a belief about themselves, that they could compete, that they could do it. Years later, that belief became three of the most famous words in advertising: just do it. This is the deeper lesson. The best brands are not products, they are tribes. Give people something to believe in and belong to, and they will not just buy from you, they will identify with you. But none of it, not the team, not the tribe, not the swoosh, would have survived without the one quality the whole book is really about. If you read Shoe Dog looking for a clever strategy, you will miss the point. The real story is how much punishment Knight absorbed and kept going. The cash crises never really stopped. At one point, the bank dropped Nike entirely, and only a Japanese partner named Nisho, who believed in the vision, paid off the debt and saved the company. Then the United States government hit Nike with a demand for $25 million in back import duties, enough to end them. Knight fought it for years and finally settled, hating every cent, and went back to work. Crisis after crisis. Most of them the kind that would have finished a lesser company, and a founder who simply refused to stay down. That is the thread running through the entire memoir. Not genius, not luck, though there was luck. Endurance. The willingness to take the hit, write the check, and come back tomorrow. Knight is blunt about it. Building anything great is mostly about being the last one standing. It is not glamorous, and it is rarely fun. It is simply the difference between the people who make it and the people who merely had a great idea once, which is a beautiful idea, and also the one most likely to be misunderstood. There are three ways people take the wrong lesson from this story. The first is hearing, follow your crazy idea as quit everything and wing it. Knight did not wing it. His first money came from his own father. He ground through years of financial fear, building the thing shipment by shipment. The passion gave him the direction. Relentless, unglamorous work gave him the fuel. Romance without that grind is just a daydream. The second is the myth of the lone founder. The legend says one visionary built Nike. Knight spends the whole book demolishing that idea, insisting it was the buttfaces, Bowerman, Johnson, Woodell, and many more. Nobody builds anything great alone, and the founders who believe they did are usually rewriting history. The third is the most dangerous, because it hides inside hindsight. Nike looks inevitable now, a sure thing from the very start. It was not. It nearly died over and over. It rode waves of luck and timing Knight could not control. And for every crazy idea that becomes Nike, thousands vanish without a trace. Do not mistake a survivor story for a formula. Learn the mindset, but respect how close the whole thing came to never existing. So how do you actually use this? Here is a concrete example. Imagine someone with a real crazy idea, a side project or a small business that genuinely pulls at them. The reckless version quits everything on Monday, burns through their savings, and panics when the money runs out. The Knight version is smarter and braver at the same time. They keep the boring job that pays the bills and use it to fund the dream on nights and weekends. They start before they feel ready, selling out of the trunk of the car, so to speak, learning from real customers instead of waiting for a perfect plan. They watch cash like a hawk, knowing that growth can bankrupt them as fast as failure. And they pull in a few believers, people obsessed with the same idea, rather than trying to carry it alone. A year in, the reckless one has quit and gone back to a cubicle. The disciplined dreamer is still standing, still building. Here is a second example, inside a company. A manager inherits a talented team and a single huge client that provides most of the revenue. The lesson from Knight is twofold. Give the talented people a mission and then get out of their way, because trust unlocks work that supervision never will. And quietly, urgently, build a second and a third client, because a business that leans on one relationship is one bad phone call from collapse. And this is the reflection mentioned at the start, the thing Knight would tell his younger self. After all the fighting, he realized it was never really about the shoes, or even the money. It was about the calling and the people he got to chase it with. The prize was the pursuit itself. Most people learn that far too late. He wants you to learn it now. If you keep 3 things from Shoe Dog, keep these. First, chase a calling, not a job. The crazy idea that will not leave you alone is worth more than any safe plan, because only passion survives the years of pain. Second, building anything great is a cash-starved brawl you win with a team of believers. So start before you are ready, guard your cash, trust your people, and never let one partner own your fate. Third, winning is mostly refusing to quit. Take the hit, write the check, and come back tomorrow. Shoe Dog, in the end, is not really a business book. It is an honest confession that the polished success stories are a lie, that greatness is messy, frightening, and barely survived, and that it is still, somehow, worth every minute. If the idea of a burning purpose that carries you through impossible odds speaks to you, the breakdown of Think and Grow Rich is already on the channel, and it is the natural next watch. If you want the PDF notes used to break down this book, comment PDF below. When I see your comment, I will share the link so you can go through every key idea yourself. And tell me in the comments which book you want decoded next. Your comment might decide the next video. This is Blood, Sweat, Gold, where luxury is earned, not inherited.